Every Friday night at exactly 8, my son called. He hadn't missed once in 6 years. So when the phone stayed silent that night, I felt it in my chest before I let myself think it. My wife looked over at me from her chair and said, "Maybe he's just working late." I called anyway, straight to voicemail. Then I called his wife. She answered on the first ring, too fast, too smooth. "He's out with some buddies from work," she said. "Can I talk to him?" I asked. A pause that lasted just a little too long. "He'll call you back tomorrow." That's when I picked up my truck keys. If you're already leaning forward in your seat, I'm glad you're here with me tonight. Tell me in the comments what town you're watching from. I like knowing how far these stories travel to reach somebody. And I'll say this now, so it's said. Some names and details in what follows have been changed. Some moments compressed for the telling, but the truth underneath it is real enough that I still think about it most nights before I fall asleep. My name is Walter Grady. I'm 68 years old, and for 36 years I worked as an electrician, first for the county and then for myself, running wire through half the houses in Danbury Creek, Ohio, before my knees finally told me it was time to stop climbing ladders. My wife Loretta is 65. She taught piano out of our front room for almost 30 years, and even though she's mostly retired now, she still keeps 2 students on Tuesday afternoons because she says a house without music in it stops being a home. We've been married 41 years. She still complains that I leave the porch light on all night, and I still tell her that's what porch lights are for. Our son Daniel is 33. He's an accountant, quiet the way I used to be at that age. Careful with numbers and careful with people too. He married a woman named Renee about 7 years back, and 3 years ago they had a little girl, Willow, who has her mother's dark hair and her father's habit of asking why about everything until you run out of answers. Every Friday night since Willow was born, Daniel calls us at 8 o'clock sharp. He props the phone up on the kitchen counter in their house over in Millbrook, 20 minutes from us, and Willow climbs up on a stool so she can see the screen, and she tells us about her week, in a voice that goes up at the end of every sentence, like she's still deciding if the story's exciting enough. Rain, snow, the flu, doesn't matter. That call has come through every single week for 3 years. That Friday started like any other. Loretta had a chicken in the oven, and the whole house smelled like rosemary and butter, the way it always does on Fridays because that's the night Daniel and his family sometimes drive over after the call to pick up leftovers. I was in my recliner with the ball game on low, and Loretta kept walking past me on her way to check the oven, resting her hand on my shoulder each time she passed, same as she's done for 4 decades. Willow's going to tell us about her school pageant. Loretta called from the kitchen. She's been practicing her line for 2 weeks. I know, I called back. Daniel sent me a video of her saying it in the bathroom mirror. 8 o'clock came. I muted the television and set my phone on the coffee table between us, the way we always do, both of us leaning in a little, like we're waiting for a surprise, even though we already know what's coming. 8:05, nothing. Loretta smoothed her apron and said maybe he got stuck on a call at the office. Tax season running long into the fall this year with the new filing extensions. Maybe, I said. 8:15, I dialed his number myself. 4 rings, then his voicemail, his voice bright and a little rushed the way he always sounds when he's recording those messages. "Hey, this is Daniel. Leave a message." I hung up without leaving one. 8:30, I tried again, and this time it didn't even ring straight to voicemail, like the phone had been turned off or dropped somewhere it couldn't be heard. I tried Renee's number at 8:45. She picked up on the second ring, and something about her voice was wrong before she even said hello even too rehearsed, like a woman reciting something she'd practiced in a mirror. "Walter." "Hi," she said. "Sorry, things have been a little crazy over here. We were supposed to get the call at 8, I said. "Is Daniel around?" "Oh, he's out. Some of the guys from the office took him out for drinks. You know how tax season gets. He probably just lost track of time." I gripped the phone a little tighter than I meant to. "He's never missed a Friday call in 3 years, Renee. Not once." I know. I'll have him call the second he's back. Probably late tonight, though. Don't wait up." "Where's Willow?" "She's already down. Long day at preschool. She was worn out." "Can I talk to her?" "She's asleep, Walter. I just put her down 20 minutes ago." Another pause. Shorter this time, but there. "I'll tell Daniel to call you first thing tomorrow, okay? Don't worry." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there, holding the phone with the chicken going cold on my plate, and Loretta was watching me the way she does when she already suspects something but hasn't let herself say it yet. What did she say? She said he's out with people from work. Loretta set her fork down slow and careful, like she was setting down something breakable. Daniel doesn't go out on Fridays. Fridays are for us. I know, and he'd never let that call slip. Not without a text first, not once in 3 years. I know, Loretta. I looked at the phone, then at the dark window over the sink, then at the front door, the way a man looks at a door when part of him is already walking through it. In 36 years running wire through people's walls, I learned one thing that never let me down. When a circuit goes quiet that's never been quiet before, you don't assume it fixed itself. Something's broken somewhere upstream, and it doesn't fix itself by you deciding not to look at it. I told Loretta I'd call again in an hour, and if nothing changed, I'd drive over first thing in the morning. She nodded, but her knuckles were pale around her water glass, and neither one of us finished our dinner. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there next to Loretta, listening to her breathing even out, her hand resting on my arm the way it does when she's worried but won't say it out loud. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, I gave up pretending. I got up quiet, pulled on my flannel, and went and sat at the kitchen table with a pot of real coffee. Not the decaf the doctor's been pushing on me since my last checkup. No missed calls. No texts. I dialed Daniel's number one more time and let it run all the way through to the voicemail beep just to hear his voice, then hung up without saying anything. There's a photograph on our kitchen wall. Been there 12 years. Daniel, at maybe 19, standing next to my work van, with a coil of copper wire slung over his shoulder, like he'd earned it, grinning so wide you can barely see his eyes. He used to ride along with me on jobs some summers. Not to help, he was hopeless with a screwdriver. Still is, but because he liked watching me trace a problem back to its source. Why does the light flicker in the hallway but not the kitchen? He'd ask. Why does the breaker trip every time Mom runs the hairdryer? Because somewhere along that circuit there's a connection that's loose or corroded or carrying more than it was built to carry, I'd tell him. And everything downstream of that bad connection is going to act strange until you find it and fix it. He liked that. Said it made the house feel less like a mystery and more like a puzzle with an actual answer. He became an accountant instead of an electrician. Said he liked finding the one number that didn't add up in a whole page of numbers that did. Same instinct, I told him. Different wire. I let my mind go, finally, to the place I'd been keeping it from all evening. Marcus Bell, Renee's husband. No, wait, that wasn't right. Renee was married to Daniel. Renee's the one. And it was never really Marcus. I worried on. It was something in Daniel's voice the last few months, something careful and small, like a man picking his words around a landmine he wasn't going to point out to you. I'd noticed it at Willow's birthday in June and told myself it was work stress. I'd noticed it again over Labor Day and told myself the same thing. I'm ashamed now of how many times I told myself the same convenient thing. By 6 in the morning I was in the truck. Millbrook is 20 minutes on a good day. Less at that hour with nobody on the road. Daniel and Renee's place is a 2-story colonial on Ash Grove Lane, pale blue with white shutters, the kind of house where the flower beds still look tended even in October. Chrysanthemums Renee planted every fall without fail. I parked across the street and just looked at it for a minute. Curtains drawn on every window. No lights. Daniel's car, the gray Camry, sat alone in the driveway. Renee's SUV was gone. I walked up the path and knocked. 3 solid knocks that echoed down the quiet street loud enough that a dog 2 houses down started barking. Daniel? Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Willow, sweetheart. It's Grandpa Walt. Nothing moved behind those curtains. No footsteps, no television, no voices. I went around to the side, cupped my hands against the garage window. The gray Camry sat where I'd seen it from the street. The other bay was empty. 3 years back, after some trouble 2 streets over, Daniel and Renee had the locks redone, and Daniel had pressed a spare key into my hand at Sunday dinner. Just in case, Dad, he'd said. Quiet enough Renee wouldn't hear from the kitchen. I'd kept it on my ring ever since, and never once used it. I stood on that porch with my fingers wrapped around it for what felt like a long time before I slid it into the deadbolt. It turned smooth and easy, and the door swung open into a house that smelled wrong before I'd even stepped inside. Stale air, the heat running too high, and underneath that, the sour smell of a trash can that hadn't been emptied, and takeout containers going soft in a warm kitchen. The living room looked normal at first pass. Couch, coffee table, Willow's crayon drawings taped up along the hallway wall, same as always. But I've been inside enough houses in my life to know the difference between a room that's lived in and a room somebody's tidied in a hurry to look lived in. The throw pillows were squared off too perfectly. The remote controls were lined up parallel on the coffee table, the kind of straight that doesn't happen by accident. A single sock, small, purple, willow-sized, lay under the edge of the couch, too far from anywhere it would naturally land. I moved into the kitchen. 2 days of dishes crusted in the sink. The counters had been wiped down recently. I could smell the cleaner, but whoever did it had rushed, missed the grease splatter behind the stove. I opened the refrigerator, a case of beer, white takeout containers. Milk, 2 days past its date. No juice boxes. No little bags of grapes with a name written on them in marker. Nothing in that refrigerator belonged to a 3-year-old girl. And something cold settled into my chest that had nothing to do with the draft from the open door. Then I saw the breaker panel. It's in the pantry, tucked behind the door, same as I'd wired it myself 6 years back when Daniel and Renee bought the place and asked me to update the old fuse box before they moved in. I know that panel the way I know my own hands. And there, on the far right, was a breaker I didn't recognize, a second one added on. Newer, the label blank, where all the others were written in Daniel's neat accountant's printing. I stood there staring at it, running the wiring in my head the way I've run wiring in my head 10,000 times over 36 years, and I realized that breaker fed a line that shouldn't exist, because there was nothing on the original plans past that wall except the crawl space under the stairs. I pressed my palm flat against the narrow door tucked beneath the staircase, painted the same white as the wall around it, easy to miss unless you were looking, and I was looking now. No handle, just a flush pull, and bolted onto it, bright and new. A padlock, heavy-duty, hardware store, fresh, no rust, no age on it at all. Somebody had put that lock on recently. My legs got me there before my mind caught up to what I was doing. I laid my ear against the cool painted wood and closed my eyes, filtering out the refrigerator's hum, the furnace ticking on, a car passing outside, and underneath all of it, breathing. Slow, careful, the kind of breathing a person does when they're trying very hard not to be heard. My throat locked up so tight I couldn't speak for a second. I knocked, soft, 2 taps with 1 knuckle. "It's Grandpa Walt," I said, barely above a whisper, my mouth right against the seam of the door. "If somebody's in there, I need you to make a sound, so I know you can hear me." Nothing. And then, small, muffled, unmistakable 3 taps came back from the other side. Slow, deliberate, a child's rhythm, the kind Willow used on the wall between our guest room and the hallway during sleepovers, our little code we'd made up 2 Christmases ago. Knock, knock, knock meant I'm okay, come find me. I didn't wait after that. I went to the garage, found Daniel's crowbar hanging on the pegboard exactly where I'd have hung it myself, and I went back to that little door and worked the hasp until the wood around the padlock's screws splintered and gave. The door swung in on a set of narrow stairs going down into a finished basement room I never knew existed behind that wall carpeted, a mattress on the floor, a bucket in the corner, 1 small window painted over black from the outside. Willow was curled against the far wall with a blanket pulled up to her chin, and when the light hit her face, she flinched hard, like she was bracing for something, before she recognized me, and everything in her small body seemed to come apart at once. "Grandpa," she said, and it came out cracked and hoarse, like she hadn't used her voice in a long time. "Mommy said if it got really bad, you'd come. She said you always come." I got down on my knees on that carpet and pulled her into my arms, and she was so light it frightened me, her arms thin, her lips cracked and dry. A smear of what looked like peanut butter crusted on her chin from some earlier meal eaten alone in the dark. "I've got you," I said into her hair, and my voice wasn't steady at all. "Grandpa's got you. You're safe now, baby girl. You're safe." "I counted," she said against my shoulder, sobbing now, the sound finally breaking loose after however many days of being held in. "I counted the days on my fingers, so I wouldn't forget how long. I waited and waited." "You did everything right," I told her, rocking her without meaning to. "The way you do when there aren't any words big enough. Everything, Willow. You did so good." She pulled back just far enough to look at me, And that's when she reached under the blanket and pulled out a small pink tablet, screen cracked in one corner, stickers of unicorns peeling at the edges. "I recorded it," she whispered. "Daddy showed me how the camera works for my birthday videos, and I got scared. So I turned it on, and I hid it under my pillow, and then I brought it down here with me. I didn't know what else to do." I looked down at that little device in my shaking hands. The screen showed a video file, 51 minutes long, time-stamped 2 nights earlier. "Do you know how smart you are?" I said, cupping her small face in both my hands, dirt and tear tracks and all. She let out a small, exhausted laugh that sounded exactly like Daniel's laugh at that age. "Daddy says I get it from you." I stood up slow, with her held against my hip, one arm wrapped tight around her, the tablet tucked under my other arm. "Where's your mom, sweetheart? Where's Renee?" "She went to the store," Willow said, and something in the flatness of her voice told me that wasn't the whole truth, or it wasn't the truth at all. "She said Daddy was sick and had to go stay somewhere for a while. She said not to tell Grandma and Grandpa or Daddy would get sicker." I carried her up those narrow stairs into the kitchen and set her gently on the counter. And that's when I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, keeping my voice as level as I could manage while my hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone twice. "I need an ambulance and police at 44 Ashgrove Lane in Millbrook," I said. "I have a 3-year-old child here showing signs of dehydration, possible malnutrition. She's been confined in the house. I don't know for how long, at least 2 days by what I can piece together." "Sir, is the child conscious and breathing?" "Yes, conscious, talking, breathing fine, but she needs to be checked." "Is anyone else in the house? Is the person who did this on the premises?" "No, the house is empty except for us." "But sir, there's more. My son is missing. Daniel Grady. I haven't been able to reach him in over 12 hours, and his wife has been lying to me about where he is." They kept me on the line while I held Willow and rocked her on that kitchen counter, both of us waiting, until I heard sirens turning onto Ashgrove Lane maybe 6 minutes later, faster than I had any right to expect, and I have thanked God for that dispatcher more times than I can count since. The paramedics took Willow first, wrapped her in a blanket even though it wasn't cold, the kind of gesture I understood without needing it explained. A young officer named Ruiz sat me down on the porch steps and asked me to walk him through everything, start to finish, and about halfway through my accounting of the missed call and the breaker panel and the locked door, another patrol car pulled up fast, and out stepped a detective who introduced himself as Frank Delgado, and the look on his face told me before he said a word that this had gone further than one locked door. "Mr. Grady," he said, "we got a call about an hour ago. A man matching your son's description was found unresponsive in a motel off Route 9, about 40 minutes from here. He's alive. He's at St. Agnes right now. We're still working out what happened to him, but I need you to understand this may connect to what you found here today." I don't remember much of the drive to the hospital except that Ruiz insisted on driving me himself because my hands wouldn't stop shaking enough to trust the wheel. Daniel was in a bed with an IV line and a monitor beeping steady behind him, pale and thinner than I'd seen him in years, but breathing on his own and awake enough to know me when I walked in. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked on the single word. "Is Willow?" "She's safe," I said, gripping his hand hard enough that it probably hurt him. "She's here, in this hospital right now, being looked after. She's safe, son." It took him 3 more days to tell the whole of it, in pieces, because the doctors said the sedatives in his system needed time to clear before his memory would come back reliable. What he could tell us, and what the tablet recording later confirmed down to the minute, was that Renee had been draining their savings for the better part of a year into an online relationship with a man out of state, a man Daniel had never met and Renee had never once mentioned. And when Daniel found the transfers on a Tuesday night and confronted her, she'd put something in his coffee the next morning that put him under long enough for her to drive him 2 counties away and leave him in a motel room registered under a name that wasn't his, planning, the detectives believe, based on searches later found on her phone, to disappear with whatever was left of the money once she'd found a way to deal with Willow, who she'd locked in that basement room to keep quiet while she worked out what came next. 51 minutes of video on a cracked pink tablet showed Renee's face clear as day, showed her voice, showed her locking that door from the outside, and Detective Delgado told me later sitting in our kitchen with a cup of Loretta's coffee going cold in his hands, that in 22 years on the force he'd never seen a case turn so completely on evidence gathered by a 3-year-old. "She's going to be something, that one," he said, and I told him I already knew that, had known it the day she started asking why about everything, and never once accepted an answer she hadn't tested herself. Renee was picked up 2 days later, at a bus station in Columbus. I won't spend much time on the legal proceedings here, because that isn't the part of this story that matters most to me, though I'll say the charges are serious, and the evidence is not in her favor. What matters more is a Thursday afternoon, about 6 weeks later, when I was out in the garage rewiring an old lamp Loretta wanted fixed, and Willow appeared in the doorway in her little rain boots, watching me with the same focused seriousness Daniel used to have. "Can I help?" she asked. "Pull that stool over," I said. She dragged it across the concrete and climbed up, watching close as I showed her how to cut the old wire back to clean copper. "First thing you always do," I told her, "is make sure the power's off, every single time. That's rule number 1. "Rule number 1, she repeated, solemn as a judge, turning the wire over in her small fingers. "Grandpa, is this what happened with Mommy? Something got broken inside, and nobody found it in time?" I looked at my granddaughter, 3 years old, rain boots, a stripped wire in her hand, asking me a question most grown adults spend a lifetime avoiding. "Something like that," I said carefully, "except a wire doesn't choose to short out on its own. Your mom made choices. That part's different." She thought about that with more patience than I had any right to expect from someone her age, then handed the wire back to me. "Can I hold the tape?" "That's exactly why I pulled that stool over," I said. And she grinned, wide and sudden. Daniel's whole face at 19 years old, grinning back at me from a 3-year-old body, and reached for the roll of electrical tape with both hands. That Friday, at exactly 8 o'clock, my phone rang. I was in my recliner. Loretta was in the kitchen. Daniel and Willow were on the couch 12 feet away from me. Willow in her pajamas, Daniel with a mug of tea, the two of them watching something together on his laptop. The screen on my phone said Daniel. I looked up, confused for half a second, and found him grinning at me from the couch, phone held out in his hand. "Answer it, Dad," he said. I answered it. "Hey, son." "Hey, Dad," his voice said through the speaker, and Willow dissolved into giggles and grabbed for the phone to shout hello into it too. Loretta appeared in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in her hands, and her eyes went bright and wet when she understood what she was looking at. The Friday call had come back, not from 20 minutes away, from 12 feet, but it had come back, and in that house, on that evening, that was everything. People ask me sometimes what I took away from the longest day of my life, from the breaker panel and the locked door under the stairs, and 51 minutes on a cracked pink screen. Here's what I know now that I didn't know before that morning. I used to believe that being a good father and a good grandfather meant staying out of my son's marriage, giving him room, trusting him to handle his own house. What I understand now is that there's a difference between giving somebody room to breathe and leaving them alone in a place where nobody's watching. I noticed the change in Daniel's voice for months and told myself it was tax season. I am not proud of how long I let myself believe that. If something feels wrong about the person your child has built a life with, say something. Ask the question that feels rude to ask. Make the phone call that might make you look foolish if you're wrong. Do it while it still might matter, because later has a bad habit of turning into too late without ever announcing itself. I believe I was meant to be standing on that porch on that particular morning, key in my pocket, for a reason bigger than luck. Not because I'm anybody special, because a 3-year-old girl was holding on to a promise her mother made her, that if it got bad enough, Grandpa would come. Some promises are too important for the universe to let break. My own opinion, worth whatever you think it's worth from a retired electrician in Danbury Creek, Ohio, is that real family strength was never about staying quiet to keep the peace. It's about driving 20 minutes on a Saturday morning when everybody's telling you it's nothing. It's trusting what your gut is telling you over what you're being told on the phone. Real family strength is refusing to let the people you love go silent without going and finding out why. If this one found its way into you tonight, tell me in the comments what part stayed with you longest. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it today. And if these kinds of stories mean something to you, stay close, because there's another one coming, and I'd be glad to have you here for it. Thank you, truly. from an old man who still leaves his porch light on all night, for staying with me clear through to the end of this one. I'll see you in the next.